The first chapter of the book of Proverbs, we find these words, "My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother." That's in Proverbs 1:8. Proverbs can be seen as a collection of wise sayings from a loving parent, whose main message is that blessings of peace and prosperity come to those who seek wisdom, particularly the kind of wisdom God offers. But Proverbs is followed by the book of Ecclesiastes, which seems to say, it's not that simple. The preacher quoted in Ecclesiastes observed that he gave his heart to know wisdom, but still found vexation of spirit and much grief. In a variety of ways, the book asks, can there be real meaning in a world where everything seems vain, temporary, and uncertain? And yet, while the two books look at life from different perspectives, they teach similar truths. Ecclesiastes declares, "Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man." This is the same principle found throughout Proverbs. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Be not wise in thine own eyes. Fear the Lord. No matter what life holds, even when it seems confusing and random, it always is better when we trust in the Lord Jesus Christ.
So Proverbs would be like this brilliant young teacher, and Ecclesiastes is the sharp, middle-aged critic, and Job would be this weathered old man who's seen a lot in his day.
We're going to start by meeting the book of Proverbs, the brilliant young teacher. And she's not just smart, she's smart about everything: work, relationships, sex, spirituality. She has incredible insights, things you wouldn't see on your own.
Yeah, she would be the perfect friend to have around when you need really specific advice.
So what makes her so smart?
Well, Proverbs can see things that most people don't see. She believes that there's an invisible creative force in the universe that can guide people in how they should live. And you can't see it, just like you can't see gravity, but it affects everything that we do.
So what's this force?
Well, in Hebrew, it's called chokhmah, and it usually gets translated into English as wisdom. It's an attribute of God that God used to create the world. And chokhmah has been woven into the fabric of things and how they work. So wherever people are making good or just or wise decisions, they're tapping into chokhmah.
And whenever someone's making a bad decision, they're working against chokhmah.
Right, or as it says in Proverbs chapter 1, "The waywardness of fools will destroy them, but the one who listens to wisdom lives in security."
So it's like a moral law of the universe.
Yeah, it's a cause-effect pattern, and no one can escape it. And Proverbs personifies all of this as a woman.
Yeah, Lady Wisdom.
Right, and she roams around the earth, calling out, making herself available to anyone who's willing to listen to her and to learn. Which leads to the second thing Proverbs believes, that anyone can access and interact with wisdom and use it to make a beautiful life for yourself or for others.
You can create with it like a designer.
Yes, in fact, chokhmah in Hebrew isn't simply intellectual knowledge. The word is also used to describe a skilled artisan who excels at their craft, like woodworking or stonemasonry. So you show you possess chokhmah when you put it to work and develop the skill of making a good life.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's do this. Let's go find some wisdom.
But before you do, Proverbs has one more really important thing to consider. Chokhmah isn't some impersonal force. It's an attribute of God himself. And so in Hebrew thought, your journey to becoming wise has to begin with what Proverbs calls the fear of the Lord. It's this healthy respect for God's definition of good and evil. And true wisdom means learning those boundary lines and not crossing them.
Now, all those ideas you just unpacked are in chapters 1 through 9 in Proverbs. But when I think of the book of Proverbs, I think of the collection of sayings, the Proverbs themselves. Tell me about those.
Yeah, those are what you find in chapters 10 on to the end of the book. It's a collection of hundreds and hundreds of proverbs about any and all aspects of life. And chokhmah gets applied to them, resulting in this wise guidance to help you find a path towards success, and no matter what you do.
If I design my life with these sayings, life is going to be good.
Yeah, or as Proverbs puts it, it'll give health to your bones, prosperity, a long, rich life.
Which is a really big claim.
But you can see how it's often the case. Wise people, they tend to do better. Things usually work out well for them in life. And so that is the promise and the wisdom of the book of Proverbs.
The book of Proverbs is really beautiful, but if we take a step back, some people would argue it's a little too simplistic, because sometimes horrible things happen to really wise people, and sometimes foolish people get rewarded. It doesn't always work the way we think it should work.
That's right, which is why we need to go and listen to our next wise friend, Ecclesiastes the critic, because he's wrestled with that very problem, and he's going to push us further in our journey to.
In Proverbs chapter 2, verse 6, we read, "For the Lord giveth wisdom, out of his mouth cometh knowledge and understanding." Now compare that to what King Limhi says when we read in the book of Mosiah chapter 8, verse 20, the following: "Oh, how marvelous are the works of the Lord, and how long doth he suffer with his people. Yea, and how blind and impenetrable are the understandings of the children of men. For they will not seek wisdom, and neither do they desire that she should rule over them. Yea, they are as a wild flock which fleeth from the shepherd, and scattereth, and are driven, and are devoured by the beasts of the forest." Ponder the path of thy feet, which we read in Proverbs chapter 4. We start in verse 10. "Hear, O my son, and receive my sayings, and the years of thy life shall be many. I have taught thee in the way of wisdom. I have led thee in right paths. When thou goest, thy steps shall not be straitened, and when thou runnest, thou shalt not stumble. Take fast hold of instruction, let her not go. Keep her, for she is thy life. Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Put away from thee a froward mouth, and perverse lips put far from thee. Let thine eyes look right on, and let thine eyelids look straight before thee. Ponder the path of thy feet, and let all thy ways be established. Turn not to the right hand, nor to the left. Remove thy foot from evil."
So within the Hebrew Bible, there's a scroll called Proverbs. It's about gaining wisdom.
And while most of the scroll is a collection of short proverbs, it begins with 9 chapters of speeches, in which we meet a cast of symbolic characters.
There's a wise fatherly king and a woman named Lady Wisdom.
And they're offering divine wisdom that leads to stability and life.
There's also a wicked man and a wily woman called Lady Folly.
And their way of life is attractive, but it leads to disorder and death.
Okay, so these speeches force you to make a choice. Whose advice will you listen to?
Right, these contrasting couples are like poetic symbols of the many voices out there telling us how to be human. And in Proverbs, they're all competing for the attention of you, the reader, who's referred to throughout as my son.
Got it.
Now, all these speeches can be grouped into 3 main sections. And for now, we're going to focus on Proverbs chapter 8. It's a long speech from this majestic woman,
Lady Wisdom.
She's God's wisdom personified. And she stands at a crossroads on a tall hill, inviting you to enter into God's sacred city.
Doesn't wisdom cry out and understanding raise her voice? At the road's high point, at the crossroads, she stands. Besides the gates going into the city, at the entrance, she shouts.
And then Lady Wisdom begins her speech. It has 4 main parts. In the first part, Wisdom declares her value.
Choose my instruction instead of silver, and knowledge rather than pure gold. For wisdom is more precious than pearls, and nothing you desire compares with her.
So living by God's wisdom can lead to the most valuable things in life. Healthy relationships, moral integrity, a stable, fruitful life.
You can't buy those things with money.
Right. And in the third part of her speech, she repeats the same idea.
Wealth and honor are with me, enduring abundance and justice. My fruit is better than pure gold, and what I offer surpasses silver.
Now, let's back up to the second part of her speech, where we learn that God's wisdom is very practical. In fact, humans depend upon it every day, whether they know it or not.
Through me kings reign, and rulers issue decrees that are just. Through me princes rule, and nobles, all who judge with justice.
Now, that phrase, issue decrees, comes from the Hebrew word chakak. It means literally to carve or engrave. It refers to how ancient kings would carve laws of justice onto tablets.
So a good leader confronts disorder and injustice by creating laws that are just. And when they do so, they're drawing on God's wisdom.
Right. Wise leaders become images of God, who also creates, by his decrees, carving order out of chaos. But God's decrees aren't written on tablets. Rather, they're woven into the fabric of creation itself. In fact, that's what the final part of Lady Wisdom's speech is all about. She claims that she was there with God in the beginning.
Yahweh brought me forth as the firstborn of his way, before his deeds of old. In the remote past, I was formed, from the beginning, from the earliest times of the land.
Now watch, she's going to repeat that Hebrew word, chakak, to describe how God carved order into the world.
When he established the skies, I was there. When he carved a horizon on the face of the deep waters.
Here God is splitting the dark, chaotic waters in half, making the waters above and below.
And he carved a boundary for the sea, so the waters don't cross his command.
This is God creating the boundary of the dry land, holding back the sea so humans can flourish in peace.
When he carved the foundations of the land, I was there.
The biblical authors imagined that the dry land was supported by pillars below to keep it from sinking back into the chaotic sea.
So this is the three-tiered cosmos, described all over the Bible.
Right. It's how the Israelites and all their ancient neighbors imagined the world. And notice, the dry land is sustained and protected from the surrounding chaos only by God's wise carving abilities.
That's beautiful.
It is. And it's worth celebrating. Like Lady Wisdom says,
I was beside him growing up, and I was his daily delight, celebrating before him the entire time, celebrating the inhabited world of the land, delighting in human beings.
God's wisdom delights in the ordered universe, and also in humanity.
yes, because humans are the image of God, called to live by divine wisdom as they carve out their own little spots here in his world.
But humans often reject God's wisdom, doing what's right in our own eyes.
And in the Bible, that's how humans drag creation back into chaos and darkness. It's only when we live by God's wisdom that we join his project of ordering the world, creating space and communities where all of God's creatures can flourish in peace. Or, as Lady Wisdom puts it at the conclusion of her speech,
The one who finds me finds life and receives favor from Yahweh. But the one who forfeits me hurts themselves. Those who hate me love death.
so every day Lady Wisdom presents us with a choice. Will I live by God's wisdom and contribute order, beauty, and justice to the world?
Or am I going to live selfishly, by my own wisdom, and pull creation back into chaos from which it came?
That's the decision that lay before humans throughout the story of the Bible, and still today. Which way will you choose? Lady Wisdom is waiting for our answer.
We read in Proverbs chapter 15, 1 through 4, the following. A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. The tongue of the wise useth knowledge right, but the mouth of fools poureth out foolishness. The eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding the evil and the good. A wholesome tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness therein is a breach in the spirit. Elder W. Craig Zwick, in his talk called What Are You Thinking in the Enzyme back in May of 2014, said the following. A soft answer consists of a reasoned response, disciplined words from a humble heart, It does not mean we never speak directly or that we compromise doctrinal truth. Words that may be firm in information can be soft in spirit.
We're exploring 3 books in the Bible known as the wisdom literature: Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job. And they're all asking the question, what does it mean to live well in this world?
So we've looked at Proverbs, who you could think of as a bright young teacher.
She's all about pursuing wisdom, an attribute of God that's woven into reality. And she's optimistic that if you use wisdom, you will build a successful life.
But then we come to Ecclesiastes, who's more like this sharp, middle-aged critic. And he says,
"You think using wisdom will bring you success. You'd better think again, because life here under the sun is meaningless."
And that's a phrase he uses a lot in this book.
But to understand this book, we have to realize first that we're hearing 2 voices.
So first there's the teacher, and we've been calling him the critic. He's the main voice in the book.
But he is introduced to us by another figure, the author. And he's the one who's collected the critic's words, and then at the end of the book summarizes everything and gets the final word.
So why does the author want us to hear from the critic?
Well, he wants to turn your view of the world upside down, and he's going to let the critic explore 3 really disturbing things about the world.
And we should warn you, these are pretty intense.
Yeah. So the first is the march of time, or as the critic says,
Generations come and generations go, but the earth, it's been here long before us and will be long after. No one remembers people from long ago, and all the people yet to come, they too will be forgotten by those who come after them.
So, on a cosmic scale, you and I, we are just a blip. Stars are born, and then they die and form planets which orbit new stars, and those planets, they change over time and eventually burn up.
And amidst this cosmic backdrop, my entire existence is like a blink in time.
Which leads to the critic's second disturbing observation, that we are all going to die.
Humans face the same fate as the animals: death. All people, the righteous and the wicked, the good and the bad, those who offer sacrifices to God and those who do not, they all share the same destiny. All this activity and madness, then we all join the dead.
Man, this book is depressing.
And so is the final disturbing thing for the critic, and that is life's random nature.
So in Proverbs, life isn't random. There's a clear cause and effect relationship between doing the right thing and being rewarded.
But the fact is that life doesn't always work that way. The critic has observed a glitch in the system. He calls it chance, or in his words,
The race doesn't always go to the swift, or the battle to the strong, nor does food always come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the educated. Time and chance happen to them all.
So his point is that you can't really control anything in life. It's just way too unpredictable.
So if I want to master life,
Then you're setting yourself up for a fall. Now, throughout the book, the critic uses a metaphor to tie together all of these disturbing ideas. Nearly 40 times he says that everything in life is hevel. It's a Hebrew word that means smoke or vapor. Like smoke, life is beautiful and mysterious.
it takes one shape, and before you know it, it takes a new shape.
And smoke looks solid, but try and grab it, it'll slip right through your fingers.
And when you're stuck in the thick of it, like fog, it's impossible to see clearly.
Now, our modern translations have lost the metaphor, and they usually translate hevel as meaningless. But if you read closely, the critic isn't saying that life has no meaning, but rather that its meaning is never clear. Like smoke, life is confusing, it's disorienting and uncontrollable.
So what are we supposed to do with all of it?
Well, surprisingly, the critic first of all acknowledges the perspective of Proverbs. He says it's a really good idea to learn wisdom and to live in the fear of the Lord.
Really? I mean, he just said that doesn't guarantee success.
But he knows it's the right thing to do. But secondly, and more often, he says that since you can't control your life, you should stop trying. Learn to hold things with an open hand, because you really only have control over one thing, and that's your attitude towards the present moment. Stop worrying, he says, and choose to enjoy a good conversation with a friend, or the sun on your face, or a good meal with people that you care about.
The simple things in life.
Yes, and both the good things and the bad, because both are rich gifts from God. And that's the surprising wisdom of Ecclesiastes.
Listening to the critic is painful and can lead you into some dark places.
And that's why the author speaks up at the end of the book. He doesn't want you to lose hope. He wants to make you humble into someone who trusts that life has meaning even when you can't make sense of it, that one day God will clear the hevel and bring his justice on all that we've done. And so he tells us that the proper response to all of this is to fear the Lord and keep his commandments.
So what gives eternal life value? Well, we can read that in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verses 8 through 14. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, all is vanity. And moreover, because the preacher was wise, he still taught the people knowledge. Yea, and he gave good heed, and sought out and set in order many proverbs. The preacher sought to find out acceptable words, and that which was written was upright, even words of truth. The words of the wise are as goads, that means sharp-pointed sticks to spur oxen onward, and as nails fastened by the masters of assemblies, which are given from one shepherd. And further, by these, my son, be admonished. Of making many books there is no end, and much study is a weariness of the flesh. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil.